Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not even listen to the sound of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Now, I apologize. I'm walking around the house. The lighting isn't that good, but I tend to think better when I'm kind of pacing. I'm that kind of person. I want to ask the question, what do you think of God's position toward so-called worship music in the days of Amos? Now, Amos was preaching to the northern kingdom of Israel. At that time, the Jews were split into two kingdoms, one in the north with 10 of the tribes of Israel, and two in the south, or maybe three. They had the Levites, the Benjamites, and the Judites in the south with Jerusalem. Now, Amos is speaking to the northern kingdom. They tended to be more rebellious and more wicked. And so Amos is giving mostly utterly bad news to the northern kingdom. And at this point, Amos, speaking for God, says to the people, "Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not even listen to the sound of your harps, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." I think when we assume that how great thou art, we assume when we sing psalms and hymns and worship music that God is pleased with that God accepts that as it were is worship, that singing songs that are, at least in their lyrics, directed toward God. But let's look at from the beginning, what was considered worship? I'm just taking these sequentially. I'm not arguing that this is a chronological reckoning of the beginning of worship. I'm just looking for, in the New American Standard Bible, starting in Genesis, when do they start translating what's happening as worship? And the first instance is in Genesis 22. Let's see if they're raising their hands and singing songs here. It says, Abraham said to his young man, "Stay here with a donkey, and I and the lad will go over there, and we will worship and return to you." So there's no record of Abraham raising his hands and singing lustily to God in worship. That's not what we see. We see Abraham offering up his son. This was worship. And of course, God intervened in that situation from Abraham offering up his son to God as a sacrifice. Genesis 24:26, then the man bowed low and worshiped Yahweh. This is Abraham's servant. So he bowed low and he worshiped, but was he singing, "How great thou art? How great thou art"? Was that what he was doing? No. And Genesis 24:48, and I bowed low and worshipped Yahweh and blessed Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who had guided me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Genesis 47:31, he said to me, "Swear to me." So he swore to him. Then Israel bowed, and the actual word worship is not in the Hebrew. It's in italics here, but he's saying the bowing. The translators are saying the bowing is worship here. So you have the very beginning of the walk with God from man's perspective as being noiseless, soundless. There's no worship music here, but there's worship. So what then is worship anyway? What does it mean to worship God? And when it comes down to it, you have to understand what is God talking about in Amos 5:23 and 24. Take away from me the noise Noise, noise, like the Grinch in Christmas. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not even listen to the sound of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever flowing stream. Now, does this mean that God never wants us to sing to him? No, the New Testament is clear. You can worship God with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. But here God is saying that occasionally among the people of God, musical worship in quotation marks is not acceptable, is not actually worship. Why? Well, God is saying, look, I'm seeing what's going on in your midst. I'm seeing the things you do behind closed doors and with one another. And I just can't accept this song from your mouth when this kind of stuff is going on. So instead of singing me songs, instead, what I want you to do is let justice roll down like waters. Now, does that mean social justice? Does that mean we have to tax everyone and redistribute wealth or make outcome equality for people of different ethnicities? Is that what Amos is telling the people there? They're all the same ethnicity, by the way, so that can't be it. Let justice roll down like waters. This is, at its core, the most basic sense of the word justice. Discern and choose rightly. In every situation, choose the right thing. Do the right thing. You know, the thing that even the pagans can do because they have a conscience and the law of God is written on their hearts. Do that. And he says, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. So instead of pouring out your heart in sing-song, instead pour out your heart to do the right thing. That's it. It doesn't mean social justice because remember, he's talking to a mono-ethnic culture. He's just speaking to Semitic people, Jews. So he's not talking about racial justice here. But I mean, if you're being racist, obviously, that does apply to the term justice. So we've talked about what worship is not. We've talked about the fact that song singing is not always worship in God's eyes, and that he doesn't always want it. So what then can we do? I mean, we are creatures, and we do need to devote our affections and our time and energy to serve something, right? God's the right person to do that for. So how can we worship God? This verse I'm going to read, or verses I'm going to read in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, explains not only in the new covenant, not only in the church age, but in every single age that God has ever lived in with men. This has been his expectation for what true worship is. Period. Listen to Paul in Romans 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice. What did he say? Present your bodies. Does that mean we get on the pyre like Isaac, bind ourselves and catch ourselves on fire? Is that what that means? No. No, a living sacrifice, but it is a sacrifice. It does mean the death of the one being sacrificed. What does that mean? Well, in other words, all the things you like and all the things you want, you defer utterly to God. It says, present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. This isn't just a New Testament thing. This isn't something that Paul invented. This isn't even something specific to being a Christian. This is what actual worship is. New Testament, Old Testament, before Testament, doesn't matter. Future world where we worship God, same description would be true of true worship. It is simply the yielding up of what you are. You see, Paul does not say, present your 10% in the offering plate. He does not say, sing a song very loudly. He does not say, serve on the worship team, serve with the security team, serve with this, serve with that. What he is describing is a total yielding up of who you are, and what you get to have the right to make the calls for to God. So it doesn't mean you delete your will, doesn't mean Control Alt Delete stop the will process. It means when you know what God's will is, you always defer to his will. That's worship, always. What's another way of saying that? Obedience. Worship is obedience. It's never been anything else, actually. And so it's really a misnomer to say, how great thou art, because the devil could do that if he wanted to. The devil can sing a song, how great thou art. That's why they call them wolves in sheep's clothing, right? They're looking like sheep, sounding like sheep, but they're not sheep. So, before you assume that worship music, as it is called, is acceptable to God or even considered worship by him, even if you get real emotional, understand what true worship is, not only in the New Covenant, not only in the Old Covenant, all time, past, present, and future, and eternity. Worship is obedience. Worship is hearing what God has spoken and doing what God has spoken. And if you sing lustily, how great thou art, even if you have a beautiful voice, even if you get sweaty in worship, and you're just, yeah, Jesus, that doesn't make any difference if you are not obeying what God has spoken. Do you hear what I'm saying? God literally does not care how loud you sing or what you sing or whatever if you don't obey his word. So why would you make song singing the center? I want to pull up Amos's quote again. And the reason I'm quoting Mr. Amos, despite the people that are always claiming that this is out of context, I believe that the 21st century Christian way is utterly the context of Amos. Why? Amos is speaking to people who outwardly are the people of God. They're circumcised, presumably. They have a little bit of knowledge of the Bible and their history as the people of God. They have a heritage as the people of God, but they don't observe the commands of God. And by the way, they have some level of devotion to the things of God because Amos has to command them not to sing to God. He says, take away from me, speaking for God, the noise of your songs. And I have to say that regardless of the fact that most so-called worship music is crap and garbage as far as the lyrics go, let's just table that for a moment. Let's say that it's 100% for the sake of the argument. Every worship song is utterly theologically honorable to God, etc. That gets you nowhere if you're not walking in true faithfulness with God. He won't receive it. He'll consider it noise, loud, obnoxious, bitter. Why would you offer that to God as your worship? In fact, I'm convinced that God is not even impressed or pleased with and is embittered by the Christian obsession with attending Sunday morning worship as though that was the epitome of what it is to be a true Christian. And everyone who doesn't do that, oh my, they might fall away. The whole attitude of what we do on Sunday is everything it is to be a Christian has utterly defiled the truth of the matter. Jesus, you don't see super obsessed about synagogue, do you? When you read the accounts, yeah, he attends, yeah, but how is he treated there? Not very good, is he? So we're at a stage in the history of God's people that overlaps with times like Amos, with times like Isaiah, when he says, who has required this trampling of my courts? When you assemble, and when Isaiah says, I'm not pleased with your Sabbath, sorry, he doesn't say Sabbath, he says your festival keeping. I'm not pleased with it. So if you're going to offer something to God, I encourage you not to be overly confident that you're Bethel singing, or maybe you're real sophisticated. Maybe you sing from a Trinity hymnal or a Methodist hymnal by John Wesley or Charles Wesley. Maybe you're old school. You sing the old stuff, the good stuff, right? Don't assume that the Lord cares a lick about that unless you are utterly yielded to the Most High and obeying His word completely. Period. And if there's an area of your life that you are not obeying His word, stop what you're doing and go do it.